So today we're going to talk about flexible fingers on the bow hand and making really smooth bow changes and why it's important, and some exercises to help you get really nice bow changes with your right hand. So kind of the usual format. So first we'll talk about what happens if your bow hand is not flexible, including why do we bend our pinky? Why do I bend our thumb? And then how can we adjust our grip to allow for finger flexibility. Okay, so I'm going to set up my right hand with a straight pinky, like this. And that also usually makes my thumb go straight as well, so like this. And I'm going to show you what the bow looks like when I change direction. So we'll go from down to up. So you can hear probably that there's a little bit of a gap in the sound when I change my bow. And also, I wasn't looking at the video, but also that probably the bow is crooked. So let me do that same thing, but now I'm going to make the following changes. I'm going to bend my pinky, and that usually makes your thumb bend as well, but you check it to make sure that it did bend. So here, my pinky is bent. And suddenly the bow changes become a lot more invisible and the sound sustains even as I change my bow. So this is of course super important for if you are playing sustained music or music where you need to hide your bow changes, especially romantic era pieces like Beethoven, Brahms, where you don't want that little chunk in between your bow changes. Now, Baroque music, the way that the bows were designed, we know made that the smooth invisible change pretty impossible. So in Baroque music, that's not so important. You get that invisible bow change, but then again, you want to be in total control over the sound that you're making all the time and not just at the whims of the design of your bow. So let's just set up our bow hands really quick. Okay, so hold your bow with your left hand. And the first time we do this will be a review, but for all of us, sometimes we can fall into bad habits over time, and it's important to check in with even our fundamentals, even as we're getting more and more advanced. So hold your bow with your left hand, just to support it, because it's hard to hold the whole bow with one arm, and check to make sure that your thumb is bent. Now, when I say bent, I don't mean that it needs to be like curved all the time when you're playing, because if your thumb is bent, you can see that my thumb then sticks underneath my hair a little bit, which means that I really can't get to this part of my bow at all if my thumb is that bent. So you just want it to be able to be flexible, so kind of a neutral thumb is fine, just not really straight. And then we want to make sure that we feel the bow, the frog of the bow, with our middle and our ring finger. So those two are really connected to the frog. The first finger, make sure that it's on the grippy part of your bow, technical term, and that you don't have your first finger wrapped around. I see this a lot from students. I think there's a lot of security then, like you're just controlling the bow basically with your first finger and the wrap, but again, then you don't have the flexibility that you need. So I put my little leather wrap kind of at the between the first and second joint of my first finger. So like right there. And that allows it to bend, but also straighten, because again, flexibility is what we want, not bent all the time, not straight all the time. Okay. And then the pinky sits on top like this. And like, it doesn't need to be like crazy curled, but we just don't want straight. It's so hard to flex from this position that if we can just keep everything round and kind of neutral, then we can flex and straighten, which is really the goal here. Okay, so the next thing is, let's put the bow on the string. So then we want to check in with what part of our body is actually moving the bow. So there's the back, which is going to move your bow when you're at the frog in the lower half. So that's going to be the biggest muscle that you're going to use to move your bow. Then in the middle of the bow, we have this open and close here with our elbow. That's the easiest part because it's the most natural movement, I think. And then at the tip, then we're using just our wrist to get to that last little bit. So here at the frog, I'm going to move my shoulder and back. And that's what's moving my bow. And at the frog, that is when my hand is at its most curled. But you can see, move closer, that my hand is still moving a lot. And the reason for that is because my fingers need to absorb the shock of the bow moving back and forth and changing direction. So like your car has shocks which absorb the car stuff. They absorb like the impact when you're driving, and they make it so that you're not driving like that. So it just like little springs. Okay, so that's your fingers' little springs. Okay. So then we're going to journey out to the middle of the bow, our favorite and most easiest spot. And now I'm moving the bow this way. So I'm no longer using my shoulder or back at all. In fact, your shoulders should be down and really not engaged at all. And I'm just opening, shutting my elbow. And I'm not letting my elbow swing behind me because that makes my bow go crooked, and then the sound is terrible. But my hand's still moving. Then we journey to the tip. And then let me back up and then stand on tiptoes. So then you can see the part of my arm that's moving is just here, just my wrist. So on your instrument, grab it, and then I want you to chunk out your bow into, let's say, thirds. So the bottom third, the middle third, and then the top third. And a very different part of your arm and or shoulder back should be moving depending on what part of the bow you're in. Like, you can't just use one thing for the whole thing. So if I use my back and shoulder for all the way through my bow, that's not gonna work. If I use my elbow opening and closing, that's awesome, but then I will never get all the way to the frog, nor will I get all the way to the tip. And then of course, if you use your wrist for everything, you're not gonna get very far either. So we have to use the full range of our body, our arms, our backs, our shoulders, to get to all the areas of the bow that we need. And you'll notice that you probably favor one area more than the other. Most people, the middle, of course, is most comfortable, but I find a lot of violinists really avoid the frog. And I think it's because they never really engage the shoulder and back, so they get stuck as soon as their elbow closes. And this is as far as they ever get. But there's another like 8 inches that I'm just gonna avoid, and I'm never gonna play if I'm only using that elbow opening close. So that's when you have to use the shoulder. And in that, just now, I put my shoulder up and that was the worst. Don't do that. Keep your shoulder down and just use this part of it. Okay, on to the exercises. So if you have never worked on flexible bow fingers before, that's okay. But there are little tiny muscles in your fingers, so it's not one of those things that you can usually just like will yourself to do on the first day. So we have to build up your muscles, and the easiest way to do that is on something that is not your bow, but is your pencil. So take your pencil and then hold it like you would hold your bow. I'll get closer. And then you're gonna practice straightening your fingers so they're like this. Beautiful bow hand. And then you're going to curl your fingers back into your bow hand position. Straighten and curl, straighten and curl. And I feel like the most work actually coming from my pinky. And that's why these are called pinky push-ups in middle school. But we can come up with a more sophisticated name for them. Like, no, we should just call them that. Okay. So then, zoom, zoom, zoom forward, like couple weeks, let's say. And this is a great exercise you can do because you can just do it when you're in class. You're in class all the time right now. But you can do it when you're idle, when you're watching TV or whatever. So then when you're good at that, then you can grab your bow and we'll support it again with the left hand just so that you don't, it's too heavy. And then same thing, straighten and curl, straighten and curl, straighten and curl. And then the next step is we're gonna put it on the instrument and we're going to make the bow move only by straightening and curling our fingers. So it's just gonna move a little tiny bit. Okay, so let's start in our curly position. And let's start at the frog. Okay. So curl your fingers and then straighten your fingers. And then curl them and then straighten. That's a good sound. And okay, so that's the reason why we don't only use our fingers when we're bowing, right? That doesn't get us very far. But that has to be the impetus of every bow that you switch. So my down bow doesn't start from my shoulder and it doesn't start from my arm, but actually starts from my hand. And then my arm helps like continue that sound. And then my up bow doesn't start from me just pushing my bow with brute force, but rather with curling my fingers. So straighten and then curl. Good, and then at the tip. Good, now let's work on using a combination of things. So we're gonna do our straighten and curl, and then we're gonna use a little bit of arm. So curl, straighten, and then let it glide. And then it's harder to go the other way, but we'll just do it. And then we're gonna go from straight to curl. So every time you pull the bow, you're straightening gradually, and every time you push the bow, you're curling gradually, if that helps you think about it. And then let's try a full bow. So here, at our most curliest, and then we're gonna go all the way to the tip. And you can straighten your fingers as you go to the tip. Then once we're here, we're gonna start our curling journey. So begin curling your fingers, and when you get to the frog, they will be at their most curliest. Yeah, good. And then do that 500 times. Then the next level is you're gonna stay within one of those little thirds that we divided up in your bow. And since you're home and you're not gonna see anyone, you're not going to orchestra, you're not performing, you can actually put a little sticker here and a little sticker here, and you can actually segment out your bow. I find this to be very helpful. Anyway, so we're gonna use invisible segments right now. Because I do actually see people when I'm teaching on Zoom. Okay, so now we're going to do our same little exercise, but we're going to stop when we get about a third of the way through our bow. Stop, then turn it around, start curling, then start straightening, then start curling. This is a good exercise, in some ways better than the whole bow exercise, because you don't have so much time to start like daydreaming until you get to the end of your bow, but rather the turnaround happens pretty fast. So do that like 500 times at the frog, in the frog lower half, lower third, and then do the same thing but in the middle third. Yep. And then let's jump to the tip, the same thing. Those are the flexible finger exercises that you should work on. There's another one that kind of relates to cole, another bow technique, but is also good for practicing flexible and straight fingers. So on this one, we're gonna jump. So at the frog, we're gonna start our straighten like this, right? But we're gonna actually jump all the way to the tip. Then to the tip, we're gonna start our curl. and then straighten, and then curl, and then straighten. And ultimately, my first ones aren't very good, but ultimately we want to make the frog attack sound exactly the same as the attack at the tip. So same length, same attack, same everything. Hard, but good. So that's your flexible finger exercise, and we'll go back and talk a little bit about how the bow hold relates, but that's the idea. And if you practice that, then suddenly your bow changes are being very lovely, and that gives you just so many more possibilities for the sound that you can create, and it'll help your tone a lot. So my hand is just resting at my side. Like, make your hands all floppy, and then just let them be still, and then just take your hand and lift it up, and look what it kind of looks like. It kind of looks like your bow hand a little bit. So when you're standing with your hands at your side, your fingers, make this sort of like half circle just by themselves. And no, this is not just because I play violin all the time. Yours are like this too. Everyone's are like this. No, your hands kind of form these little like circles. And so when you hold, I'm gonna grab a pencil instead of my bow just because I can do it one-handed. When you hold your bow, you want to try to keep that same like relaxed hand shape as if you were just at your side. So another great exercise is just to swing your arm, let your hand be still, keep it in its little curve, and then without doing hardly anything, just bring it up and put a pencil in it, and then repeat again and again. And that is our bow exercise for the day. This one is definitely kind of an ongoing process. Bow stuff can be tricky. To make it feel like natural and easy and out of the way of the bow actually takes a lot of like practice and a lot of thought. So don't feel bad if you're like, I can't get it right now. This video goes really well with my first video on spiccato, which feels like a very long time ago. It was before I knew I had these like great stickers I can put on my videos. So quality, not great. Content, good. So if you want to go back and watch that video and then kind of link the two together in your mind, because spiccato, of course, like we talked about, can only be done with like the most relaxed, effortless bow hand. So this could be a good one to do this one first and then go do the first one and then maybe come back and sandwich it like that. But good luck with this. I encourage you to look at YouTube videos of violinists and just look at their fingers and just look at their finger flexibility. You'll notice that they all have that in common. There is something, little side note, there are different schools of bow hands. So there's like a Russian bow hand, like a German bow hand. So sometimes you'll see in older videos that the hand is tilted a little bit more this way, and that's totally fine. Like bow holds go in and out of fashion, kind of just like vibrato and like some other like decorative musical elements. But anyway, take a look, because there is quite a range of different bow holds, and mine might not look like yours and might not look like the next person's, because our hands are all different and our finger lengths are different. So don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like someone else's, but do look for the things that people's bow hand do have in common, and it will be that flexibility of fingers. So check it out. Okay, I'll see you next week in what I believe is my last video.